Caroline.
Frangelina?
Can I proceed?
Yes, you may proceed.
Okay. I'm going to have to share my screen. Good morning and a warm welcome to our first SAMED-SALDA Regulatory Forum for 2022. My name is Frangile Swallow, a member of the SAMED Regulatory Standing Committee, and I will be facilitating this session. But before we start, it will be greatly appreciated if you can keep your cameras off and mics on mute, unless if you're speaking, of course. But feel free to use the chat facilities for questions or comments. And to allow the flow, this will be addressed at the end of each presentation. And now for the topic of the day. As the African Continental Free Trade Agreement develops, we expect companies to be attracted to this diverse continent. South Africa will be gearing up to cement its position as the primary business hub for the medical device industry in sub-Saharan region. The African regulatory framework is currently at variable levels of implementation, maturity, expertise, and transparency. This makes the environment to be a tricky one to navigate. Now, this morning, we are going to explore the medical device regulatory framework in countries as shown in the map. That is Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, and Botswana. A great thank you to Michelle Afin Garabo, and unfortunately Diaska won't make it, who freely volunteered to share information on experiences, challenges, and pain points pertaining to these countries. But please note that they are not to be regulatory experts on these countries and may invite fellow members of the committee or even experts among you to assist. Now, to start things off, I will give an overview of Kenya regulatory landscape. Now, Kenya is a promising market for medical devices and has been highly ranked among the fastest growing markets in the sub-Saharan region. Like South Africa, Kenya has limited medical device production, and the market is largely dependent on imports. Now, looking at the regulations, medical devices and IVDs are regulated in Kenya by the Pharmacy and Poisons Board. This agency has an oversight authority for the pharmacy practice, as well as the medicines and medical device industry. Now, if you desire or are planning to export medical devices into Kenya, you have to start by building a forward-thinking strategy. To begin with, you need to carefully, and I say carefully, identify and appoint a local technical representative. But with those companies that have an office in Kenya, maybe things might be easier. But if you don't, you have to start identifying carefully an LTR. Because an LTR, it's not an individual, but a company. I said carefully because this is the company that could either fast track your path to market or delay and derail the process. The LTR is expected to appoint an experienced representative with a medical background. That will be a person. And only one local representative person who should register with PBP on PBP platform and serve as the central communication pathway with Poison Board. The next important thing is to apply for a pre-verification certificate or certificate of conformity. And the agencies that should assist in this case is SGS, and CAPS is also important in applying for the certificate of conformity. You also have to start perusing the guideline for medical device and IVD, the one that is dated 2018, because it's important for you to understand the requirement first, not only the LTR. Okay, in terms of the registration process, the process starts with you ensuring that you know the definition of the medical, your product is actually under that definition. The medical device definition for Kenya is almost similar to the South African one. They're aligned to GHTF and IMDRF. The classification system is also the ABCD system, same as in South Africa. The base classified according to the risk application. And if you incorrectly classify your medical devices, you will be in for a high jump, because then your application will have to go back to the queue if it was under review. So you need to ensure that you have the correct classification. And your LTR should be assisting you if they have the experience of the Kenya market. Coming to this process, Kenya uses an online system. It's an advanced online system. And if you know about Kenya, in terms of the IT systems, they are a bit advanced. They are amongst the top in Africa. So you start applying on the system called PBP IMS version 3. If you have been in the market before and you did the listing, you were using the PBP version 2. Now, with the registration started last year in March, you are supposed to be using the PBP IMS version 3. After sending the application, you have to pay. It will generate an invoice and that requires you to pay for an application fee. And the application fee is dependent on the class that you are applying for. That is, the class A will be $100, class B $200, as C's and D's are $1,000. That will go through the screening process, and queries could be raised at that stage. And if you have the LTR, should obviously will receive a notification that there are some screening queries that need to be attended to. That will move to an evaluation phase. Even in evaluation phase, you can also get queries there, and you have to attend to those queries. Most of those queries could be that they need additional documentation in some instances. Or if you have grouped your products incorrectly, you will receive those queries, evaluation queries. At the end, if everything goes okay, you will then receive your certificate, which is valid for 5 years. But you need to also pay for the annual retention fee, which at the cost of $50. Sorry about that, the retention certificate is only valid for 12 months. So at the end of November, normally, that is the period where they open up. If you have a registered product, there's a window that opens for you to do the retention of the products that have been registered or are in the system, have been retained because they're still being evaluated. Now, this is how the registration certificate looks like. It will have that registration number and the validity. And the second page will indicate all the catalog numbers or the SKUs that have been registered under that. You have to carefully look at that, because sometimes some of the categories that might have been in your application are not featured in the certificate. So when you receive this, you need to really go through that before you send a product to Kenya, because it will be stopped if the category number doesn't appear on the certificate. The product will be stopped at the border. Next is the retention certificate. As I said, whether you have the registration certificate, you need to have the retention certificate also for that annual year. Otherwise, your product won't be admitted to, at the import gate. That product will be stopped if the retention certificate is not available. Okay, now let's take a deep dive into the document requirements and the evaluation process. For Class A, it is very easy to do a registration. What you need will be the letter of authorization from the manufacturer. And you also have to send the proposed primary pack label, artwork. At times, they will even ask for pictures or images of the product itself. You also have to submit the pre-verification certificate or certificate of conformity. Instructions for use, you indicate when you log into the system. A certificate of analysis, in some instances, this is not actually required, but you will get the cues when you go into the system. The sterilization method and validation standard, that's only where applicable. Then you'll need to have the regulatory approval from the country of origin, which could be in the form of CE or CFGs. And also the last one is proof of quality management system. In this case, it could be ISO 13485, FDA QMS, CE certificate of all the Japan MHLW. I know that in this in the MARC guidance, the guidelines said, for an example, ISO 13485, but I can tell you that if you submit ISO 9000, they will not accept it. They will, during the query session, ask for 13485. So it is important when you are exporting to some of the African countries. Now for Class B, things change in terms of the requirements and the evaluation process. The Class B, you can either go through the full evaluation route or a breach evaluation route. For the full evaluation route, the criteria there is if your product hasn't obtained any prior approval from any country, so it's your new registration in Kenya, you will have to go through the full evaluation route. Whereas the breach evaluation route, a medical device that has obtained at least 2 reference regulatory agency approval for a labeled use identical to that intended for marketing in Kenya at the time of submission will qualify for this route. There's also this, the full evaluation route that I spoke about when you don't have any prior approval from any reliable, responsible authority. The requirements will be as indicated there on the screen. A letter of authorization, a lot of things that are required there. The preclinical studies, including detailed sterilization, validation, the risk analysis, clinical evidence. It's a lot of information that is required if you don't have any prior approval. Now, for Class B, if you do have a prior approval somewhere, you can either go through the expedited Class B registration, which is known as ABR, or the immediate Class B registration, which is known as IBR. For Class B, EBR, the criteria there for you to be, for them to use this route is if your product has approvals by 3 medical device regulatory agencies, and the product must have been marketed for not less than 4 years in the 2 regulatory authorities, those authorities that I mentioned earlier. There shouldn't be any safety or issues, including deaths, and there shouldn't be any field safety corrective actions or recall, no rejections or withdrawal by any of the RRAs or even Kenya PBP. That then will go through the expedited Class B registration. The immediate Class B registration differs with the expedited in that the product should have been marketed for not less than 5 years in those 2 RRA, and there shouldn't be any safety issue. But also for expedited Class B, another criteria that they use, if you have obtained approval from at least 3 of the PBP's independent reference regulatory agencies for a labeled use identical to those intended in marketing in Kenya. Whereas for immediate Class B, you should have obtained approvals from at least 5 of the PBP independent reference regulatory agencies. And it must be in the same intended use that you'll be indicating for the product when you're marketing it in Kenya. Okay. The registration documents, the expedited registration requirements will be shorter than when you go full. It will be the letter of authorization, the list of configuration, the proof of marketing history in the same independent reference regulatory agency jurisdictions, the declaration of safety, and the common submission dossier template. This, I can tell you, it is, as they say, expedited. It's very easy. Within 3 months, or even within 3 months, you can get your registration. That is if you load the correct documents. Now, the vital elements and challenges in Kenya. As I said, you need to have appointed a suitable local technical representative. And I'm emphasizing that. And you need to also have a contract that somehow stipulates that if you are not satisfied with the service that they are rendering, you will be maybe move to another without another LTR, without them coming into play or without them maybe delaying the process. I'm saying that because we're sitting in a situation where if you want to change an LTR, that current LTR must give you a no objection letter. And if you parted ways on a sour note, you will be unable to get that letter from the LTR and be unable to get another LTR. That is very painful because the Kenya PBP is sitting on that fact that you need to have a sound relationship with the local local technical representative. And also, the other vital element is, as I said, classification and grouping of your medical devices. Otherwise, if you don't do it properly upfront, you will delay your process. Another fact is the management of variation. Go through your guidelines properly and see which variation requires a notification, which variation requires an approval before you can implement that variation. Otherwise, as I said, your container or your product might just be unlucky and be the one that's being checked, and they will have documents from the PBP indicating the original packaging or whatever you have changed. And if that variation wasn't approved, you'll also be delayed. Your operations will be disrupted. I have spoken about the change of local technical representative. The option, not in the version 3, this option, if you go to the registration, I know if you're using the local technical representative, he'll be the one or they will be the ones to do that variation or the change of LTR. But in the version 3, you also have to get an access to the system so that you can monitor what is happening. Because there's also a tendency where if you get an LTR that is more focused on distributing than anything about regulation, you will find miracles in your certificate, I can tell you. So you have to make sure that you monitor your registrations. In terms of the local technical representative, the current version, the PBP portal, doesn't actually have that option to change an LTR, which was easier in the previous portal, because you would just go there and change the LTR. But this time, you need to send a letter to PBP that should be accompanied by the no objection letter from your LTR in order to change that LTR. And also, even when you're doing some variations, the variations, you can do it in the system. There is an option to do the variation in the system, but as I said, that will be done by the LTR, but there is nothing that stops you to do it together, log in and do the changes together. Be certain that you've got the right products and the right catalog numbers. The pain point and challenges with the Kenya PBP is inconsistent responses. If you have a chance and maybe you want to make a follow-up on your registration or you make a query, make sure that you get the right person, the responsible person for that particular area. Because I have experiences that I got different responses from 3 different people, and that delayed the process of registration. And you must also have the document evidence and ask for if you have if it's possible to even record your conversation or document evidence. Otherwise, that will stand the ground if you really if you have a problem with the registration process. And I think that's all I have, but I can tell you they also obviously in the infancy stages of this registration, though they have been listing for a long time. So there are a number of challenges that we'll encounter. But hanging there, that is a profitable market. And from me, thanks for listening. If you have any questions or comment, I will now take those questions.
Frangie, I see in the chat there is a question. It says, what options are available to companies/manufacturers if the LTR is uncooperative?
You don't have an option except to change. If they're uncooperative, as I said, you are the one who selected them. But yes, you can approach PBP, but I can tell you they're going to say the same thing, that upfront, you need to know more about that LTR. You can even ask them if that particular LTR has, are they aware of them? I mean, do they have an experience? You can also approach, I mean, for those that have offices, obviously in Kenya, it will be easy because sometimes you even appoint your office in Kenya to act as the LTR. But you don't actually have much to do if you go wrongly and in appointing an LTR. You need to have an idea, ask around. I don't know where, but ask around about that. The the capability, the experience and everything about that LTR. But don't just go with it, because most of our companies are actually now in the Kenya market. Maybe they have listed. If you have to choose an LTR over again, please do it. Don't focus on the person who's distributing, because their experience might be in the distribution, and his interest will be in selling the product. And remember also, you can use a lot of distributors, but you have an option of one LTR, and that LTR will have to be responsible for anything that happens to your product in Kenya, whether or not he is responsible for distributing the product. So things like pharmacovigilance and everything, they will sit on that LTR. The PBP will go through that LTR. So that's why I said it's very important setting up the boundaries, setting up the contract upfront with your LTR.
Frangie, there are more questions in the chat. So can South African medical device companies gain access to the PPB portal? Is it only the LTR?
You can access the PBP if your LTR, if you are in good terms, obviously, the LTR will give you the login details. That's why I said in anything that you do, whether they're registering, I would advise that the LTR shares the screen with you on that day, and you do the registration, or shares the login details and you do the registration. Because I ask in terms of me getting access or registering on that, I'm not allowed, because I don't stay and I don't have a PIN number. I'm not in Kenya and everything. So it's only the LTR who is allowed to do that. But if you're in good terms, obviously you have to be in good terms. The LTR can share login details and you can easily access your products there.
Thanks, Frangie. Then we have another question. Does the LTR need to be appointed by the manufacturer or the in-country distributor?
Well, you can do you can. That's why I said if you have a distributor in Kenya and that knows somebody who can stand in and is an LTR, you're working together. But the letter has to come from the manufacturer that appointing that the LTR. The letter will come from the manufacturer, which is you, appointing that LTR in Kenya. But in terms of identifying, you can work with your distributor. It's not the distributor that needs you. Okay. Thank you for listening. I know I ran out of time. And if there are any, I can take maybe 1 or 2 questions at the end of the presentation. As I said, that we do have other people that will give you an idea of what's happening in Africa. And next on our list will be Michelle. And Michelle will give us an overview of Botswana, followed by Athene and Karabo, who will give us an overview of, Michelle will give us an overview of Ghana, whereas Athene and Karabo will give us an overview of Botswana. And in Dakra's absence, I will just chip in for Ghana, for Nigeria, and hopefully I'll do a good job there. So over to you, Michelle.
Thanks so much, Frangelina. I hope you guys can hear me and see my screen.
We can. Thanks, Michelle.
Great, thank you. All right, so as Frangelina just said before she gave her talk on Kenya, there's quite a few SAMED-SALDA, SAMED regulatory people on this call who will be able to chip in with some answers here. I'm not the expert on Ghana, but I'm happy to present the information from the Ghana FDA regarding the regulatory process. Okay, Jayshree Lalchut from Zimmerbarnet helped me put the slides together. All right, so the process seems pretty similar to Kenya, although a bit simpler. So essentially, this is the overview of the process. It starts off with your submission of the application. Really what that entails is you submit the completed application form, you get the requisite documentation added to that. You provide samples as per the sample schedule requirements from the FDA, and you pay your fees. Once that's done, that initiates the evaluation of the application. So the application and dossier evaluation proceeds and it gets peer reviewed within the Ghanaian FDA. Then there's a laboratory evaluation of the samples that will commence if required, depending on the classification of your submission. And then you've got the GMP QMS audit of your facility, if applicable. So that's obviously if you're in a manufacturing type of environment or distributing directly, well, locally in the country. Product registration committee meeting occurs once this evaluation is complete, and then you'll get a recommendation for either approval, deferral, or rejection. And the final decision is taken by the CEO, who then will send correspondence to you, the applicant. So let's review the general requirements. I'm just going to go through the new registrations versus re-registrations, and then the variations of registrations. So just to note, the re-registrations needs to happen 3 months prior to the expiration of a previous registration. So you're looking at having a cover letter, your applicant details, the same in Kenya, where you need a local agent. So that needs to be a registered company or an accredited manufacturer's representative registered in Ghana. Your applications need to be accompanied by the following. So a duly signed covering letter, completed application forms with 2 soft copies, samples of the product in the final package as specified in the authority's sample schedule. So the FDA documentation, which I reference at the end, has clear guidelines on this. All supporting documents as specified on the application form need to include a manufacturing license, certificate of free sale, certificate of analysis, where appropriate, stability data and sterility certificates, and then any other technical documents that are device specific, which are listed in the application form. You'll also have to pay a non-refundable application fee as per the fee schedule that I'll discuss a few slides down. For specific requirements, so for high-risk medical devices, additional documents are needed, and that's going to be the description, the category, the evidence of conformity assessments, any device verification and validation reports, if required, a clinical evaluation report, preclinical and post-clinical reports, so that's where studies are necessary. We need performance evaluation reporting to be done, obviously the instructions for use and any warnings and risk analyses associated to these high-risk medical devices. So Ghana has two specific requirements that are quite segregated in their FDA guidelines, and the one would be for condoms. So it's required that for the registration of condoms, 1,600 pieces need to be submitted as samples. This must be sampled from batches whose CRAs are presented in the dossier. After the registration, any consignment of condoms imported would be detained, sampled, and analyzed, and sampling is done on a batch-to-batch basis. The consignment would only be released if it passes the quality evaluation conducted at the medical device laboratory of the FDA. For all imported condoms, a mandatory foreign inspection of the manufacturing facility will be conducted by the FDA to ascertain compliance of this facility to CGMP and or QMS regulations. And then from a diagnostic test kit perspective, which tends to cover some of the IVDs, it is required that details of the manufacturing process of source materials, including the following information, are provided. So that would mean the control of your starting material, the source of your materials, so if it's proteins or blood, etc., the method of manufacture and purification, the characterization, the specification, the CRAs, and quality control reports. The manufacturing process of the finished product, you need to include release specification and shelf life specification details as well. And in terms of the finished product, you will see that you need to include specificity, sensitivity, accuracy, stability, and obviously stability goes with justification of shelf life data. So the outline of the evaluation process is as follows. So obviously the applications are received by the FDA. The application consists of all your documents and hard copies and an electronic copy. So they don't have a nice fancy system like Kenya yet. Your samples and your fees. An application may only be received by the FDA upon payment of the application fee. Then the actual process of evaluation. So it's really done on a first in, first out basis, unless the product meets the requirement for expedited review process as set out below. So expedited product procedures are included for public health programs, including HIV, AIDS, malaria, TB, reproductive health, neglected tropical diseases like Buruli ulcer, and any other disease condition that may be determined by the FDA from time to time. There's also pediatric programs will be expedited. Ministry of Health tender purposes will be expedited, and any post-approval variations. In terms of renewal of registration, the initial evaluation report produced is peer-reviewed by a second evaluator. Then during that evaluation, additional data or samples can be requested through a deferral letter. And once a query has been issued to the applicant, the evaluation process stops until the FDA receives a written response to the query. So further processing of the application may only be made if responses to queries are issued in the same deferral letter, containing all outstanding information requested in one submission. And should you fail to comply with this condition, or if the queries have been reissued for a third time, then the applicant provides unsatisfactory responses and they reject the application. If your responses are not submitted within 12 months from the date that they were issued, it's considered that you have withdrawn the application. Thereafter, registration of the product may only be considered upon submission of a brand new application. In terms of their classification of medical devices, it's very similar to ours and to Kenya's. So obviously class 1 to 4 with risk levels low to high. The FDA documentation does go into significant amount of detail with if, buts, and all these caveats as to how you categorize your medical devices. In terms of your fee structure, so this is the latest fee structures that we could find. So this was the, I think it was March 2021 when these were released. So from the Ministry of Health and the FDA. So if you're looking at medical devices, classes 4 and 3, you're looking at $160 per annum. If you're looking at class 2 and 1, then it's class 2, 100, class 1, 60, and local medical devices would be 250 per annum. And of course, product grouping is possible for these applications. In terms of timelines, so again, I haven't dealt with submission with Ghana myself, so I don't know how true to this it really is. But according to their guidelines, they say the process of applications is within 6 months. The applicant may be required to provide additional data within 12 months frame. In case additional time is required, a formal request for extension can be submitted. Your product registration validity is only 3 years, not the 5 years like Kenya. And you need an importer license, which is valid for a year. And I thought I would just give you the references as to where I got this information. This is the last draft, it's 2013, of the FDA guidelines for medical devices. And then I know a lot of you on the regulatory forum are acquainted with Joseph Benny. He gave a great review beginning of last year on the updates to these medical regulations. So it's really, he took this document and just fleshed it out a little bit more. So it's quite content heavy, but really worth reading. And then I found a great resource for the regulatory resources for Africa. If you click on Ghana, there's all the guidelines and forms that you can actually pick up off this website, which are referenced in the original guideline. So I thought I'd give that to you. Great, and that's it from my side.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was really informative, and as you have already indicated, you might not be the regulatory registration expert, but you've got the right formula if you really need to go into that market. Do we have any questions from Michelle?
We do, and again, I encourage the rest of the regulatory committee or other people on the call to step in if they have answers as well. Do you have experience with requests of manufacturing site audits and fees from Ghana?
Yeah, I'll need someone else from the team to answer that because I don't.
Yeah, I also don't have the experience in terms of the GMP audit.
Sharika, I see your hand is up.
Hi, Caroline. Yes, so the fees for Ghana for GMP inspection is between 6,000, if I'm not mistaken. 6,000. It's actually GMP inspection. Sorry, it's 7,500 USD for a GMP inspection. That's the fee. What is the question again? Do you have experience?
With requests of manufacturing site audits and fees from Ghana.
Yes, so when we got a request, it was a fee per site where we had to then speak to them about, I mean, because we had multiple sites, and to pay that fee is quite expensive for each site. So we tried to negotiate to ask them if we could pay for one site where we had most of our products from, which they allowed, but I don't know if they would allow going forward. You'd have to open up that conversation with the authorities.
Thanks, Sharika. And then there was one around are the fees shared annual retention fees, or is that the amount you shared with us now?
So that's the GMP fee that I shared now. Registration fee varies between the classes. Class A is 180 USD. Class B is 300 USD. Class C is 480. Sorry, Class C and D is 480 USD. So I don't know if there's a retention fee. I haven't received information of a retention fee.
Thanks, Sharika. And then just one more question. Is it any waivers granted for the audits around manufacture sites?
They were not willing to budge in a way on the manufacturing side. From my experience, they were open to negotiating how many sites we pay for. That's my experience.
Thanks. I don't see any further questions, Frangie. If there's anyone else, maybe you want to put up your hand.
Okay.
No.
Thank you so much, and thanks for there's Maris.
Marie.
Hi, Marie.
Yeah. Hi, sorry, just a question, Sharika, since you have this experience with the manufacturing site audit, did they actually physically visited the sites, or you just paid the fees?
They actually did go to our site in the US, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they wanted the physical site, right? They want to see manufacturing
Yeah,
line.
the actual manufacturing site, yeah. And back then, I think it was 20,000 USD. It was, so they did bring down the fee quite significantly.
Mm-hmm. And the fees include everything in terms of travels, accommodation, or that's extra to be paid extra?
From my experience, it was all inclusive. Yeah.
Okay, so it's the 7,500K for
7,500, yeah. For
sorry, the
flights,
7,500.
accommodation.
Okay.
I think you would just have to issue out a visa letter, an invitation letter for their visa.
For their visa. Okay. Thanks, Sharika. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sharika.
Problem.
Funi.
Hi, Sharika. I just wondering what class is your product? What type of products is it?
The class that I've registered.
Yes.
So our products range from between B and D. So we've got a range of products.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks again, Michelle. Always a pleasure to have somebody volunteering. Now, as I said, we supposed to have the Ghana presentation on Nigeria, and unfortunately, the lady who volunteered couldn't make it today, but she sent a presentation which I'll try to go through. And with the help of the committee, obviously, we will tackle all your questions. Okay, let's do that at Nigeria. Can you see my screen?
We can. Thanks, Frangie. It's just not yet in presentation mode.
Okay. So Nigeria, medical device and IVDs. In terms of the definition, the medical device means an instrument, apparatus, and prevents, including components, parts, and accessories sold and advertised for internal and external use in the diagnosis, treatment, mitigation, and prevention of any disease, disorder, abnormal physical state, and symptoms thereof in man or in animal. The regulator, this is not the regulator for registration, but this is just for the standards. It's a SONCAP. That is, when you start with your registration, we also need to go through this verification through the SONCAP. And the process there is the pre-shipment compliance inspection to determine the compliance with NIS approved equivalent standards or technical regulations. And In Nigeria, they use same as in Kenya, they use SGS and sometimes Intertect to do this pre-shipment compliance inspection. The listed regulatory products undergoes conformity assessment in their country of origin. So which means when you have the SGS here, you do all those assessments through the SGS at your country of origin. The registration per product, the registration is done per product and per manufacturing facilities. Accessories and parts are listed along with and under the main device. And this, I can tell you, is also very important to ensure that you are, don't say that the accessories are not medical devices, but you need to indicate them on your application, because otherwise you would have problems when you get the import permit. Software products registration is not actually enforced in Nigeria. The variation change required for name or site changes. So if there's any name or site changes, you will require to go through that the variation change through the SONCAP. Okay, so this is just one process of preparing for your registration upfront. Okay, coming to the medical device NAFDAC, which is the NAFDAC process. Nigeria, just like Kenya, they have the online system for registration. They don't use the manual system like Ghana, but they're also a bit advanced in terms of the registration, the online system. Their online system, the advantages also with the or the best practice with the Nigerian online system, it is managed by, I think it's a third party. So when you have problems in completing the document, that you always get a chat next to your I mean on the portal, and then you can log in your complaints or your questions, and they will gladly help. If there is something that has to do with the NAFDAC, the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration, which is the regulatory authority, then they will let you know about who to contact. So they're very helpful in that sense. Whereas with the Kenya, if you're stuck with the system, you are stuck. So in terms of application, you have to start by buying that form online. There is also an authorized representative required who should be a Nigerian citizen. You need to have import permit issues after successful. No, sorry, I'm just going to go through some of it. I don't think they you have to do them upfront. The requirements in Nigeria, you need to have a power of attorney. You need to request a power of attorney for you to proceed with an application. You need to give your AR that power of attorney. There's also written application stating name of the manufacturer and of the product. It's a number of pages through that you have to go through that portal. It's all about the product details, and then it goes to the company details and a lot of requirements. You need to attach the documents. Now, the other challenge with the online system for Nigeria is in terms of the images, they have to be in the JPEG, and if you go in and you do not change your document into what they have requested in the document, you will not be able to upload the document. Even the size of your document is determined. If you have a bigger size document, better make sure it is smaller, because it will not be able to be, you won't be able to upload the document. The other requirement that they want, that you need to have a trademark approval. And I've been through the registrations in Nigeria, Ghana, and Tanzania, and all that. Nigeria is the only country where a trademark approval is required. And you won't go through the process if you don't have that. They also require a quality certificate, a certificate for free sale, a COA, and a certificate for business incorporation. So all this certificate for business incorporation and the trademark approval, you all can only find them now in the Nigerian registration process. You also have to send a label or artwork uploaded, device label, including provision for your label, which is what maybe we're fighting for in South Africa. In Nigeria, your label must have a space for the NAFDAC registration number. Otherwise, they will reject your print. You have to do an artwork and send that artwork must have a space where you would have a NAFDAC registration number. So if you have a product in South Africa, you better maybe, and it's now registered in Nigeria, you better have the NAFDAC registration number, or else arrange with your LTR or your distributor on the other side, that when the product arrives, they will relabel or they will just put the NAFDAC registration number. But before you do that, you need to also apply. You need to also send a letter to NAFDAC that can we get a waiver for the manufacturer, an exemption of applying that registration number upfront, and that will be done when the products arrive in Nigeria. So it is not just you don't just leave it and say it will be done there. You need to get an approval that will be accepted. So there's also a letter of invitation for GMP inspection. We haven't had any inspection, so I don't know if what happens in terms of that. But what I know is we pay for the inspection, even though it never happened. We didn't raise that issue because it went up to a registration, and we got the registration, so then nothing was raised. But the money, they got that money. I don't know what they're paying for in terms of the GMP if they haven't done that. You also need to have samples, and the best thing for you to do in terms of the COA, make sure that that COA is connected to the samples. If you currently have a distributor, the best way to send a COA is to ask a distributor to give you a batch number for that particular sample that he has there, so that it's easy for him to submit the sample to NAFDAC on your behalf, and you submit the COA. So don't submit a COA, and the next thing you can't even locate a sample that's related to the COA. So the COA that you send there should be related to the sample that you send to NAFDAC. Okay, in terms of, the fees, I just had that, I took it from my personal presentation, just as comparing the process there. Never mind the second column there. It's just the timelines for registration and the validity. And even in Nigeria also, the certificate lasts for 3 years. I'm not sure about the Ghana if you said 3 years, because ours is there is one that's 5 years. And as you can see the last column there, it's the regulatory agency. In terms of the fees, Nigeria is actually very expensive. It's cumbersome at times. I know now that yes, it's an online system, but there are some times where they can ask for a paper submission outside that. If there's be a lot of queries that they raise, they call them directives. So even in this case, what's good about the Nigerian system is you as a manufacturer can register on the system. So you can even load the documents. You can even go through your registration and see what you've gone wrong. And when they send directives, you will be able to see those directives and then respond to the directives. And also at the bottom, on the screen of your registration, you will see where your registration is, whether it's in approval stage, whether it's in a screening, vetting, and everything. So in some cases, it is actually comes handy and better than even the Kenya portal. So yeah, I think that's all that I had with the NAFDAC fees. As I said, unfortunately, we had the lady not being able to make it, but I think if there's any question about Nigeria, I'm glad to answer those questions.
Ranji, there is a question. For Nigeria, can we register per product group / families?
In Nigeria, there aren't any any option of families and all that. There isn't an option where you have to register the families. And that's one thing that we have raised. You can't register families in Nigeria. That's why it turns out to be very expensive. But what you do, what happens is when you register one product and it's got a lot the catalog numbers or that family, you don't have to indicate that family. In fact, when you sell, let me say an example, micropole, everything that says micropole, we just sell them. There is, sorry, I'm very sorry to say that, because there is an area where you will indicate maybe the sizes of that micropole, 20 mil and all that. So I suppose that could be a family, because you need to register the sizes there. But in terms of the systems where maybe something goes along with micropole, you are unable to do that. Unlike the others where you can register a group or even a system.
There is another question. If you have products for RFID to register with the Nigerian Communications Commission. Robin, I don't really know the question. If you can perhaps unmute and just clarify.
Hi, I just wanted to confirm if anybody has gone through that process. Thank you.
Okay, no, not with me. Unfortunately, I haven't gone through that. If there's anyone. I think we can maybe, I mean, I do have somebody in Nigeria that I can maybe pose this question to, and I'll come back to you.
Okay, no problem. I just thought if anybody had any experience.
Okay.
Not to worry. So, thank you.
Okay, cheers.
There are no further questions for Nigeria, unless someone would like to put up their hand. No.
Okay, thank you. There are no further questions. If there's any other question, and obviously we can still take it after this last presentation. And this presentation is about Botswana. We know that Botswana is still.
Ranji, I see there is a hand from Madeleine.
Madeleine.
Hi, Frangie. Thanks so much for stepping in and doing such a great job for the forum this morning. When you finished with the Africa part, I just want to say a couple of things to this audience about what's going on with SAPRA, okay?
Okay, thanks, Madeleine. Okay, now we are going to invite Karabo with Thin to come and present about the Botswana landscape, regulatory landscape. Over to you, Athena and Karabo.
Thanks, Frangelina. I'm just sharing my screen. Can you see it?
We can, thanks.
All right. So, morning, everybody. Myself and Karaba will be talking to you about Botswana, just to give you an update what's happening in that country. And just so, and it's the kind of nearly last presentation, so we will just be taking turns when we're discussing it with you. So the regulatory authority in Botswana is called the Botswana Medicines Regulatory Authority. Just in case, I know there's some people on here where African countries, that they're trying to learn about. So I know a lot of people do know, but just for those that are new to the space, just that's the name of the authority. And they deal with medicines and medical devices and other health products. So the main two things that have happened in Botswana over the last year to year and a half is that they've called up medical devices for listing, and also they had an amendment to their medicines bill that was published for comment. So just in terms of the listing, the mandate of this Medicines Regulatory Authority is to regulate medicines, the medical devices, and cosmetics in order to promote human and animal health. And the reason why they wanted to list medical devices was to identify those devices, those medical devices, including the IVDs that were in circulation in Botswana, just to give them an indication. And they wanted to be able to identify which products were on the market. And that listing is going to form a provisional register for medical devices that will be allowed in or out of Botswana going forward. So who needed to list their medical devices? It was any entities or individuals that manufactured, distributed, sell, import and export, and have inventories of their medical devices or IVDs in Botswana. All facilities as well, which was the district health management teams, the hospitals, the laboratories, their central medical stores, pharmacies, veterinary and human clinics, etc., were also required to list their medical devices and IVDs that they had in their inventory. And the deadline for submission of this was the 31st of March 2021, which was then subsequently extended by a month or two. I can't remember exactly.
Okay, and in terms of the authorized representative, as we saw in other regions such as Ghana and Kenya, in Botswana, you do not need to have an authorized representative. So an international manufacturer or an authorized representative from the manufacturer is allowed to list and export these medical devices, even if they are not based in Botswana. When you're listing, submitting your listing, these are the documents that you need to submit as part of your listing process. You need to complete a relevant form. So there's two forms that are available, and we'll take a look at those a little bit later. There's an Excel sheet also associated with those forms. You need to also submit a signed and dated declaration of conformity from the manufacturer. Artwork, excuse me, artwork of the labeling. So your secondary packaging needs to also be submitted, or the shipper needs to be submitted. And then in terms of the classification of the medical devices, very much similar to Kenya and Ghana, in that it uses the IMDRF classification rules, and the medical devices are classed from A all the way to D, being the highest class medical devices.
So people were wanting to know if there would be a certificate issued after the approval of the listing. There's not going to be a certificate, but they will acknowledge after receiving the documents. And then once they finished making the listing and reviewing all of it, there will be a register which will be their database, which will be published after that exercise is completed. And according to what we've heard, this should happen around the 31st of March 2022. There's also the exemption from registration of medical devices when one is importing COVID-19 related medical devices and IVDs, and the application for exemption in this instance is mandatory. So this is the guideline for the exemption from the registration of medical devices is the guideline 01. This was effective from April 2021. It is applicable only to COVID-19 related medical devices, obviously because of the current situation that we're all in worldwide, but it does exclude the rapid COVID-19 antibody test kit, and as well all combination products, for example, medical devices that have active pharmaceutical ingredients.
And in terms of the requirements for your exemption, you would need to submit an application form. In addition, you would need to submit proof of payment. So 350 pulas needs to be paid. A copy of the manufacturing license or ISO certificate needs to also be submitted. You need to also submit proof of market authorization or a free of sale certificate issued by the relevant SRA. Certificates issued by the European notified bodies, or in the case of WHO pre-qualification, will be accepted, and a copy of the final letter needs to be submitted as well. With regards to the rapid COVID-19 antigen test kit, the WHO emergency use listing needs to also be submitted to BOMRA. You also need to also submit with your application a clear photographic sample of the product itself, indicating manufacturer's instructions of use. The exemption is only valid for 6 months, and thereafter would need manufacturers or distributors would need to submit another application to BOMRA. There are additional requirements when you are dealing with IVDs, and particularly this is any, you would need to also submit a clinical evaluation report. And if there's any updates made to your clinical evaluation reports, any changes to indicated use of the product, that information needs to be submitted to SAPRA. Of course, the DOC and the WHO emergency use listing needs to also be submitted for all COVID-19 antigen test kits.
So I know the exercise has mostly been done, but there might be new companies entering, and they would need to also still list their products or find out about, because obviously the deadline has passed, but they still are in evaluation. And in meetings that they had with stakeholders, they did mention that, they were still flexible and they could be contacted. So this is the guideline that's applicable. It's the BOMRA ER MEDP 02 Guideline 01, which was effective from the 21st of December 2020, and it is only applicable to listing of the medical devices, and again, exclusion of combination products, which are the medical devices that have active pharmaceutical ingredients in them. So when you are listing the medical devices and IVDs, you filled in the form for listing. You would either fill in a Form 1 if you were the manufacturer or authorized representative, and you also included Annexure 1 for the listing of the devices. If there were stakeholders other than the manufacturer authorized representative, they would use Form 2 along with Annexure 1 again for the listing of the medical devices. And originally they had said if you were a distributor or representing, if you had a distributor representing you, you didn't have to submit the additional items, because that even had it in writing from one of the staff of BOMRA, that we didn't have to submit the labeling and declaration of conformity, but afterwards they actually asked for it. So best when you do submit, you submit all of this up front, and then you would fill in the form and the documents and you would email it to those addresses.
So this is just wanted to show you guys Form 1. This again, as Athene had mentioned, this form is completed by the authorized representative or the manufacturer, submitted along with your Annexure 1, which is the listing. Form 2 is completed by all other stakeholders apart from a legal manufacturer and an authorized representative. Again, it needs to follow. It needs to be accompanied by the listing itself, Annexure 1, and all supporting documentation.
So I didn't do a snapshot of the Excel, but basically the information that it asks for is quite straightforward. It asks you for the product name, and then what's the brand or trade name, and then your model name or number. If there is a software version, if applicable, what's the intended use of the device. what is the product category, RVD or medical device, your device risk classification, which is A, B, C, or D, A being the lowest, D being the highest, and it is, as Karabo mentioned, it's according to the IMDRF classification, as several other countries in Africa are. They wanted also the lifespan or shelf life or use period of the device or RVD, the name of the manufacturer, the physical and postal address of the manufacturer, the email, fax, and phone number of the manufacturer, manufacturing site details, and then they wanted a report or information on any quality, efficacy, or safety issue with the device. So obviously you'd need to have that information on hand as well to insert in that form. So the current status with the listings are that they have definitely had some stakeholder engagement meetings that did show, information sessions, and there were quite a few hours throughout the afternoon in some cases, and it did show that they definitely have a clear intention to work together with industry. They want to keep industry informed, and they were taking comments and questions. They did also state that the review of the listings is still in process and ongoing. As mentioned earlier, the stakeholders will be notified once completed. It was anticipated to be, completed around March this year, but obviously we don't have a definite timeline. And after this, obviously the next steps would be that we can anticipate they will call up the products for registrations. I've got there in brackets and a question mark, near future, because we don't know. Obviously time will tell as it unfolds.
And we're just sharing here the medicines and related substances bill that was released in January of last year, which is in the draft phase. In the draft phase, I understand that industry and stakeholders have been requested to submit comments in relation to this draft bill. And some just part 4 of the part 6, I'm sorry, of the bill itself. Number 51 and 52 relates to the classification of medical devices and IVDs. And again, as mentioned, this is still in, not a final bill has been released, so comments are still being reviewed by BOMRA.
Yes, and then thanks, Karabo. Just to also mention that they introduced this bill, it's an amendment to the existing act, because they said there were gaps in the existing act. They were just trying to, close out on those gaps, but it is still in draft format. And that.
Thank you so much, Karabo, and I think you remind me of a African say that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Your teamwork is amazing. And I wish we could have more people volunteering and giving out and sharing information, because we all have one objective for South Africa to make it out there and all our products to feature in the African market. And if there are any questions for Garawen, I think please, can we address them now?
Yes, there are some questions. So there's 2 that kind of in the same sphere, so we'll deal with them together. It says, if you have received an acknowledgement, is this sufficient for the time being? And the question also goes further, is the acknowledgement via email or an official letter?
So from my side, I would say any kind of acknowledgement you get would be sufficient for now, because it's still in process, and there's no final rules on everything yet. I personally haven't received any finalization communication from them. So that would be my answer on that.
Maybe sorry, just to mention, Ethine, we did, when we submitted our listing, we received acknowledgement via email. There wasn't a letter that was issued, but an acknowledgement that the listing was seen and accepted.
Oh, sorry, I meant, yeah, we did get that. I meant, on the progress of the submission. I haven't received anything further other than a further request for additional documentation, but I haven't received anything on the finalization. Sorry.
Great. Thanks, Athene. So Athene and Karabo, there's another question. What is the current process with new products?
Okay, I can speak from experience here when we had to submit an amendment to our listing. So we actually submitted an annexure, an annex to our original listing. So submitted the Excel sheet indicating the products that were either removed or added to the new listing. They accepted that. There was no issues so long as we met all the other requirements, such as indicating or submitting all the required additional documentation.
Yeah, I second that. That would exactly be the process that you would need to follow.
And then can submissions be done using family grouping in Botswana?
So on my side, we did group when we did send some family groupings. And like I said, other than my acknowledgement, I haven't had anything to the contrary to say that it wasn't accepted. I don't know what your experience was, Karabo.
Absolutely. Same here. We submitted as family, as groups, and no objections from BOMRA as yet.
And have you heard anything with regards to the draft bill becoming official?
I haven't heard anything further other than when they asked for comment and then the deadline for comment was extended. But since that, I haven't heard anything further. I don't know if anyone else on this call has heard anything further. Okay, it doesn't seem like it.
Are there any other questions related to Botswana? You can either put up your hand or use the chat. If not, I'm going to go back to the questions that Frangie did not get a chance to deal with around Kenya. Okay, let me just jump back there for you, Frangie. So there was a question. What is the process with product modification and changes? How is it dealt with? Which changes required amended registration?
Yeah, as I said, if you go through the guidelines, the administrative changes, you just have to do a notification. But you go into the system, the PVP system, it has one of its options there is variations, product variations. And there it will guide you on what is required. And as I said, there's also a declaration from manufacturer about the changes. We haven't done any variation yet in terms of the product. As I said, they are actually using that functionality to do an LTR change, which didn't work. But depending on what the guideline says, there will be some changes that you will have to wait for an approval. But there are those that you just do a notification and upfront, and there is a fee for any variation that you do. So whereas as soon as you log in there and you say variation, it generates an invoice depending on the class.
Thanks, Frangie. We have another question. Do you know which section of the regulation deals with the QMS requirement?
Not at the top of my head. Not at the top. I will send out that note, but yeah, not at the top of my head in terms of the sections. But there is a section that deals with the QMS.
Kristen, we will just follow up for you. And then we have a question. What is the process in becoming an LTR in Kenya?
I mean, an LTR, as I said, you as a manufacturer, you obviously have to select, but the criteria, one of the things that they emphasize is that company must have somebody who has the medical background, meaning maybe a pharmacist or they who understand the regulations in Kenya, who can be the go between the company and the PVP. There isn't any other criteria as long as you are a resident and the company is located in Kenya. That qualifies for it to be an LTR. So an LTR, as I said, it's not a person, it is a company, but the company will appoint a representative. So So that person will be the one who will be dealing with the system and, you know, addressing any queries that they have. But you can't be an LTR here. You have to be in Kenya.
Thanks, Frangie. I don't see any more questions. If there's any more questions related to Kenya or any of the other presentations, you can type it in the chat or put up your hand, and we're happy to address those now.
Yeah. If there are no questions, I would really like to thank you for attending the session, and I hope you've taken some pointers that will help you in your forward thinking strategy. If you still have any issues, we are available to answer any questions. And yeah, because we still have time, I will hand over to Madeleine. I see there's a hand. I can't see the name.
It's Non-Demiso.
Hi, Non-Demiso.
Hi, it's okay. Caroline has already informed me that they will respond to me offline. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, on that note, thanks for listening and thanks for giving me the opportunity. And I'll hand over to Madeleine.
Thanks, Frangie. I hope everyone can hear me. Just very quickly, I know you all want to go to your next calls or take a break. I just wanted to let everybody on the call know that SAPRA has made a statement that they will allow renewal of licenses. Those of you who've got medical device establishment licenses, they will allow them without a certified ISO 13485. For those of you who are going to do your renewals this year in 2022, which will be a large proportion of the industry, the understanding that we have from Dr. Matibe is that there will be a 36-month period where this will still be allowed. After that, your certification will be required. So we still have 3 years, but I just wanted everybody to be aware that SAPRA has made this gesture and that it should be gazetted shortly. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that Section 18A and 18B exemption in terms of bonusing and sampling has been extended. So the deadline was December 2021. It has been extended, and I'm sorry, I forget for how long, but I just wanted everybody to know that that is still in play. So those are the two things I wanted to mention. And thanks very much to Caroline and Frangelina for running the forum this morning. Lots of informative information and lots of dialogue and discussion. So we really appreciate your participation.
Okay. Thank you. And you have a lovely rest of the day. Yes.
Thank you. Bye.